being very quiet, young man. Hello, Brandel.
Good afternoon, Troy.
Very quiet here today.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Congratulations on another symposium well executed. How was the the stuff that wasn't streamed?
It was very, very good. I felt it was a very warm event this year. Even, well, not that the ones you weren't at wasn't warm, but the whole package, it just seemed, yeah, I was impressed. You can see my view from the
Uh-huh.
mission, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got a an update. I thought I would test real quick. Yeah, no, it was very good. The day before we went out for Singapore dinner, so it was nice. On the day afterwards, we went to an exhibition. We saw this guy, Wayne McGregor. So it was very much about bodies in XR and not in XR and technologically mediated. And yeah, that was worthwhile. The day itself,
Yeah.
the audio, unfortunately, wasn't very good, as obviously you noticed. But yeah, no, I was happy. So let's try this one, map test. Yeah, we don't need that, right? So there's nothing in this document, but on the map there is. I can now move that out of the way. Now I wanted this to stay as the normal writing view, so you could keep doing it, but that hasn't happened yet. But here we go. He's experimenting with different styles.
Uh-huh.
So part of the problem is they kind of tend to go into it, you know? So yeah, actually, since I have you here, oh yeah, by the way, see the attention, exactly what you asked for?
Yes, yeah. Makes it a
That
lot
was
easier.
that was nice. What's that?
It's a lot easier to work with, yeah.
Yeah, and we're still working on the textures for these things, not always perfect. Oh, hang on. They billboard now.
Neat.
Uh, maybe, maybe. But so, yeah, so here's a question. So one tap to show the full information or not. Let's look at mine. Oh, no, actually, let's look, not that one. Doug. Oh, come on. Right. That's quite okay. It folds better, but it is 3D text, which isn't. This is weird.
Yeah, yeah.
But
That's
just
funny.
okay. But yeah, so here's the question. We need a context menu.
Uh-huh.
So we have tap to close and open. So close, tap and move. This is all very intuitive. Tap to see further information. But what do you think it should be to spawn a menu? Should it be tap and hold? I've gone
I
through the.
think
So, sorry.
Yeah, I think tap and hold is probably better than double. Oh, sorry, I'm on my Mac here. I think tap and hold is probably better than double tap. Um, you could put an adornment on hover that you then focus on in the same way that the hot dog dragger bar does that at the bottom. But I don't know that that's going to add a lot to visual noise. You know, there's only so many hot dogs in Vision OS, and so you don't want it under every element. But yeah.
What do you mean by hot dog?
You know the white bar underneath every window?
Oh, that is that called a hot dog?
No, it's called a dragger bar, but a grabber bar most of the time. But I call it hot dog.
Okay, that's cool. So, okay, I'm out of this because I think I had a major breakthrough today to run past you, and that is, let me see, first of all, is anyone else in here today? Oh, Mr. Mark is here. Fantastic. Hey, Mark. So, yeah, you probably saw some of that, Mark. Nothing particularly interesting there, but um, is Brandel still there? Is he hiding?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, there was the issue of when we're. First of all, I'm not saying that the notion of this kind of speciality is going to be useful for anyone or everyone. Absolutely not. But one thing, I think, Mark, I think we discussed it last week, is you want to have a kind of a desktop. You want to have a top level. If, let's say you do want to work in something like this, where you go, put it on, you can choose to work at Sloan stuff or some other project or personal or whatever it might be, right? And on the Mac, I've had a headache with how to do that. If it was going to be that was weird, Brandel, the way you just popped in there.
Yeah.
You
Sorry.
know,
I was listening. I've got headphones in.
yeah, no, I know, but it was just like, whoa, that's cool. Anyway, so I thought we may have to make a library of all kinds of things, but then I realized a lot of software like Pages and Microsoft Word, they have kind of a loading screen where you choose a template. So on the Mac version of Author now, I'm going to have the loading screen, which can be turned off, be a map. So it'll be your default space in there. So when you open, you have that on your normal laptop. You can move things around and try to do the equivalent in the Vision. So then the issues Mark has pointed out, as in when you open a new place, what happens to the previous one? Stuff like that we can work on. So anyway, that was today. That was today. And we missed you, Brandel, obviously.
Yeah, apologies. Although it meant that Heather had to fly to New Zealand over the weekend for a family emergency, so it was good that
Oh,
she was able to get over.
oh my God, what happened is, well, yeah.
Um, a court case. Uh, my brother-in-law was the victim of some abuse in the 90s, and so the court case went ahead.
Okay, that's rough and disruptive.
Yeah.
Hmm. Mark,
Um,
do you want to do a summary of last week or something? Be interesting to hear from your perspective.
Oh, as ever, it was interesting, and it managed to loop in some things that were sort of, not the thing of the moment, which I think is always useful that the conclave keeps, something of the wider thing there. I think it was interesting to see that. I think that the general, I think an interesting thing is the general take seemed to be that that there was no doubt that we sort of crossed some sort of threshold, certainly in terms of AI and possibly in terms of XR. That was perhaps more sort of general than I'd expected. I think again, I think there's this hidden fact that, of course, when people say that they talk about things like AI, they tend to actually be much more knowledgeable than the man or woman in the street, and that's still, I think, a challenge. Because I don't think anyone really supposes all these new tools aren't useful. The question, in the broader sense, is knowing which to use and which time. One of the things I was itching to ask people is, how many AI systems do you use, and how many of them do you pay for, whether it's your work or personally? Because an interesting thing I'm coming to see is most people seem to be using more than one. In other words, one alone does not do what they need, and very few who are actually using it are doing it on any sort of a free tier. That doesn't matter, but it's an important sort of thing to foreground. In other words, the experience that's being talked about in the general sort of fluff of the press is not quite what we're talking about. So, when people say this is all working, they're actually talking about a quite deliberate commitment to use. And as at least one speaker noted, a commitment to use that is probably beyond the pocket of the average person. So there is an access problem here, if looming or here, because I don't think to pay for all this stuff, I don't think it's going to get any cheaper. Is the other interesting thing. So there's going to be an interesting element of haves and have-nots in that, which is not our place to control, but it's something to be wary of as we lean into some of these things, because it's very easy to start becoming dependent on a system that is actually unaffordable to many of the users.
That's true.
think that's
One that people will be able to rely on is Apple Foundation models. It's actually running on your machine. So
yeah, I hasten to add, don't take my last as a sort of that wasn't it.
no,
I wasn't. If it sounded gloomy, take it wasn't meant to me. That I think I suppose
No.
I'm ever the pragmatist and the man on the opposite escalator, wondering, yeah, but what does it all mean?
I would like nothing more personally than for the entire AI moment to absolutely fizzle out. I feel like it's been overcapitalized in a way that while there is genuine benefit to artificial intelligence, it's been completely clouded by the scope of the kind of sort of hype and by turns doom and gloom about what that hype is going to kind of wreck and tear through. And it's mostly motivated by wanting to be on the next wave and some degree of animus towards those industries that people sort of intend to be disrupted. So I'm with you, Mark, on the cost aspect of it. But one thing that I am conscious of is that when things run locally, then by definition, they can't actually be taken away, or they can be taken away. People can take anything they want away from a system if it's not truly open, but they don't necessarily have any reason to take them away. It's not costing them money for them to be continually provided. So on a Mac, on a Vision Pro, on a phone that has the ability to use Apple Foundation models for what it's worth. And again, like I actually don't use AI for like literally anything. So I don't know, but if those are useful, then they are here to stay. That's all.
No, I think it's interesting, and because another thing I found myself missing and wanting to see is when people talk about using these things, is that normally you see the idea and you see the finished product. What you don't see is how many iterations, questions it took to get from one end to the other, and I think that is incredibly valuable. Again, people mistake this and saying, well, if I show you everything, it might in some way be too private, or it might not, or it might not be the best example. Thinking, no, but it's a very real example. It's really interesting to understand, especially as I find it just annoying. Everything I try and use this for doesn't work. So just at the moment, I'm trying to understand the mechanics of citation, which turns out no one's ever written about, because it turns out to all go back to an entirely manual process that's been sort of munged into technology. And I've had a sort of interesting conversation with Claude. So, oh no, and I understand. I do understand why it happens, but it's been really interesting because I didn't think I'd asked a really hard question, which was, can you explain to me the mechanics of doing citation in a software setting? And apart from the fact there's a citational anchor and the notion of a reference somewhere else in the document, that is about all that exists in a tangible form. And this was all brought up by, it happened to be Mark Bernstein asked me, because he wanted to do some integration with reference managers in his tool. And he said, okay, so what's the mechanic here? And I said, well, it's basically manual. It's all about making whatever you have look like print, depressingly. Which is why I love the term the printer scene coming up. That's one I've definitely put on a spike, and not in a negative way, but I think it's that the citation thing is a really good example of how could we have got this far past paper, and we don't understand what citation means except in the broadest sense. We know what we intend by doing it, but the fact of the matter is that all the ways we measure it are sort of approximated by databases, that's your reference manager system, in a way that makes it a complete sort of roll of the dice to get the thing you wanted. Yeah, sorry, it's something I'm just in the middle of at the moment. But it was another reflection that I took from last week.
Okay, I was going to say something, but Mark, what do you mean when you talk about citations like that? What do you mean citations really are?
Well, we all understand that if you cite something, sorry, I see some hands up. If you cite something, the intention, the sort of the well-intentioned thing is you're trying to show provenance and you're trying to give attribution. That's not an issue. The question is, let's say I'm building a new app and I want to have citation built into it. What are the mechanical parts of this that I need? Realistically, it means that if you're going to produce a long-form document, you're going to have a method for putting citational anchors into your document, and a means for producing, whether as you go or at an end point, a bibliography / reference. There isn't even a single term to define that list of stuff that goes at the end. There's also a confusion, because I've been reading through a whole lot of stuff at the moment. There's also a confusion between references and footnotes, because in some domains, footnotes are how you do references, and they don't really use and so footnotes in the broader sense are deprecated because that screws up the referencing. And so it goes. Nothing, and it's another thing where nothing you look at turns out to be what you thought. And you thought it was as simple as just making a list of references because you wanted to be kind and say where you found this stuff and who did it originally. The other thing that becomes apparent is that the mapping. So what's missing in the digital age is basically a set of agreed fields that any system can use. So there are quite a few reference managers around, all use a different database, all use a different field structure. So they have a bespoke mapping, inbound and outbound, of all these stylistic things, which are only designed. The only way you can validate most of these styling things is to print it and see if it looks like what you expect. It's just bizarre. So the weird thing is, that's why in a way, BibTeX, for all its sins, it is probably the best approximation. But BibTeX hasn't had a lick of paint since I think 1999 was about the last time. Basically it was before the web. Early web. So it doesn't really understand digital documents or sources either.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's reasonable. So Peter sent me some really great papers for the book. One of them is 25 pages long. So that is too long. And as he says in an email we're talking about it, that's a case for stretch text if there ever was one. So one of the key things that I think is really important is obviously clear text, and to have code running. Sorry, there's something wrong with my charger, I think. What in the world? Running low power here.
That's you. I thought it was me. I was like, what?
Yeah, 1 second. I can't talk if I don't have a machine. Let me plug in next to the other one. Right. It is an Apple charger. Anyway, it looks like it's plugged in. Right. So one of the things that's really interesting and cool and useful for our near future is to have text that's active in a document, in a plain text type document, whether it's PDF plain text. And I know that's an oxymoron, but I think we all agree what it could be.
164 divided by 8.
Brandel, what's 164 divided by 8? Or Mark or
No,
Peter?
64 divided by 8.
8.
8.
Okay.
It's
We've
hip
been-
to be square.
We've been doing the computer numbers 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 5, 12, 10, 24. So it fits that. So yeah, that was fun. Right. So I agree with Peter that this should be there, but I'm wondering if, since we have nothing else to talk about in terms of specific topic today, there are any thoughts on how do we deal with Peter's paper that is massive, primarily because there's a lot of code in it / prompts. which is useful. Do we just make it tiny? Do we develop a whole new format for it? Any thoughts?
Well, what do people get out of reading it if it's paper? Is it like it's going to go in a book, right? And that the major objection is to do with the printed page version of it, right?
No. The printed version of it, I mean, maybe we would actually, yeah, maybe we start having a digital version and a printed version that's quite separate now because of this.
Yeah. Well, so if you wanted to go down the route of digital archiving and things, you could print it in the book, but you could, because it has, if you then also believe that it has no merit for human reading, then you could put it into, I don't know if QR codes are actually better data compression, but you could put it into some kind of better compressible, machine readable, but nevertheless paper printed form, so that it's at its maximum information density there. That presupposes that people don't want to do reading of it, so that it's a way of being able to have a round trip through the paper back into a computer. Right.
Well, I'm not saying that people shouldn't read it, so I'm sure Peter himself, who is here, has comments. Please go ahead, Peter.
Okay, just for general context, what I wanted to do with the piece was to walk the reader through the experience of interacting with one of these LLMs in a development context. So it actually consists of some discussion, followed by a prolonged session with the LLM where I start off with the prompts, and the LLM output, based upon the questions also, is of substantive interest because I gave it a planning task. And the planning task was thinking about how to build our next NLS augment, Xanadu, smash up hypertext system. So I was querying it about the older systems. So its responses contained some really useful, interesting material describing the earlier systems and the different technology options. And then that was interleaved with my prompts, guiding it, asking questions, and also trying to raise the point to the reader that unless you have a fairly deep grounding in whatever it is you're having that dialogue with, it's not going to be productive. So seeing the volume of the responses from the AI was also of relevance because it shows you how much you have to be able to sift through to be able to possibly spot something that's going off the rails. And one of the cornerstones of the piece was showing where it did just that, talking about Xanadu tumblers from Literary Machines 93.1, and the discussion with the system really had to be read in its entirety, both the transcript of what the AI was saying and how what I was reading from the AI was influencing how I was going to prompt it in the next round. So I wanted to show that interplay between man and machine. Now, if we tore out all of the code listings, it was like a normal straight computer piece where I was just talking about how we built something. The code probably would be of limited interest to most people. So you'd stick that in an appendix and you'd say, see listing 1, see listing 2. If somebody cared about a particular listing that was really, really long, they'd go off and see it. But in this case, you have to be bouncing back and forth between the full extended response from the AI and the prompts. So that interleaving back and forth makes the separate appendix model break down unless you have two windows open side by side with transpointers showing how the piece from one window relates to the piece in the other window. So we could do it with the prototype Xanadu system from the 90s running on the Java platform, I think he used for that implementation. But we don't have that commonly available. The other alternative would be to ask the AI to compress its own output and give me summaries, but then the summaries would miss the entire point of what the full discussion is like.
Well, Peter, I'll say before I start this, I feel like I'm making homework for somebody else, but it is with good intent, which is what's really interesting is the sense you've just described the sort of situation that I've been sort of digging into earlier in the sense of actually understanding, seeing how the sausage is made. and being able to, but given that there's a lot in there, I'm wondering whether what the general reader might more usefully get would be almost an abstracted version of what you've described. In other words, rather than seeing all that raw, saying, okay, well, I did this and it turned out I got too much, like I got way too much. The gist of it was that I couldn't find this. So I ran it again and this bit was less and that bit was more or something. Doing that sort of almost more descriptive abstraction might be inherently shorter, but possibly also more accessible to the wider audience, because the sort of full transcript that you have will still be of great use to a smaller number of people who are able to actually dig into that. And it also helps with the problem of, well, do I want to put it all in the main article, which is problematic more for the sort of production presentation side, but it's not problematic in terms of the document, but it's just the amount of things. So I don't know if there's anything in that. Not having actually seen the document, I'm spitballing here that such a reduction is possible. But if it is, I think that also be really, really valuable writing, because again, trying to make sense of the difference between, there's this magic thing. I ask a question and I get the answer done, instantly. And as you're rightly pointing out, in many cases, actually it's a little bit more complicated than that and requires some acquired knowledge. So abstracting the sort of what's the right term for it? But almost in a sense, the argumentation going on between you and the agent would be interesting if it's possible. And I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if that helps. Thanks.
So on a completely different topic, now there's just the four of us, because this topic I feel could go on for quite a while, because it's an important and big topic, is how to go forward into the new year, because there are some changes we can make. And one of them is how to better decide on themes and better stick to themes, so that we all are heard and we all expand the discussion. So after this year, it won't be Sloan funded. So we can't change the timing because Dini won't have time to join all the meetings. And I know that some people like Alessio, Monday evening UK time, well, Europe time, is just not convenient for him. So that's one thing. So about the timing, we'll have to discuss that. But the other thing is, Ken Perlin, who was here, he's now much more involved in the community, which is of course great. And for him to bring more people into the community, he feels we need to be really clear about topics. So when people come in, they don't feel like, hang on, weren't we discussing something else? Also, one thing I've noticed about some of our more intelligent friends, I'm wondering if you guys have the same thing. It started, I noticed, with Fabienne. I'm looking at you, Brandel. And also with Andrea. And that is, if we have a topic, even if it's a one-on-one conversation, and then me with my very different brain say, oh, and then there's this, they get quite upset. Once there is something chosen, they find that without a really clear context switch, it's really, because they're so focused, it's a mental load. So what I propose to you guys is, going forward, we'll try to have more themed discussions. And it's really important you feel extremely happy suggesting themes to me so we schedule them. Also, when we have a theme discussion, I think what we should probably do is something along the lines of the first 15 minutes is entirely open. So if someone has something, they read something in a book or whatever it might be, so that's a clean time. So if someone comes in and they're expecting a specific theme, it's like, in 15 minutes, we'll get to it. You can log off if you want and come back. That's fine. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think the thematic sort of consistency and coherence is a reasonable thing. I guess if people are sort of preparing for a specific sort of theme on further discussion, then it can be derailing to sort of meander through some other stuff. But I don't think I mind too much. But it does if people are coming for a specific topic, then it can be hard for them to see that thing come through. I know when I talked to Andy Matushuk, he did feel like his view was that his preference was for something that would be more sort of nailed down to a specific thing at a specific time. So I get that. Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. I think I will be able to present in an official capacity on model element and spatial web at some point soon. So I look forward to that.
Very good. Very good.
Very good. One thing I've noticed on some of your Sunday morning talking head shows, they'll have a little sidebar showing the timeline for the show, and it'll be, like 10:15 topic X, 10:20 topic Y, 10 whatever, and we could build into that a space for people's reactions so that if Frode wants to come in with an observation after the main topic it's already been sort of like pre-scheduled on the agenda, that there's a slot so people won't feel like, well, what's going on here? We've broken off from the original topic. Oh, also just sort of circling back to what Mark Anderson was saying about looking at the nature of citation. I was actually having almost the same conversation with the same AI a couple of days ago. And wouldn't it be just wonderful if the AI could say, these are some very interesting esoteric questions you're asking, and it just so happens that there's another user who was asking me these same things. Would you like me to put you in touch with him? And I would love to see that function. Like other times, Grok will say that it's had several interactions, that it's already built out pieces of this system with other users. And I wonder, is it lying or did it really do that? Because it claims it can, let me just spin up a private repo and I'll give you access to the code base. I haven't got it to successfully do that yet on once. I claimed it can do it. It said, in half an hour, I'll have a code base working and ready for you. It's never actually followed through on its promise. But I wonder whether we could be looking at threading multiple parties' conversations with the AIs together, some sort of a shared context, so that Mark Anderson and I could both have a context object sitting out in the cloud somewhere that any of our respective AIs can tie into.
So this is an example of what we're talking about, because you started talking about the meetings and maybe having some sort of a timeline. And
right, and then I segued into...
Yeah. No, which is perfect, right? Because first of all, what you're mentioning is really interesting. But let's say there's more of us here and that happens. What is the best way for me to tell you to try to sidebar it, talk about it later or whatever? Because face to face, like with Mark and me, we have a really good rapport. But sometimes online, if we don't feel we understand each other, through Zoom, it can feel much less pleasant. Do you have any suggestions?
Maybe some sort of a subtle facial gesture, something, popping your right eyebrow up. Exactly. That would work. Subtle?
But I don't think...
if we're in, we know the code.
But Peter, when you get into something you're really interested in, I don't think you see. I think you're thinking too hard. I don't think you would notice it.
You may have a valid point there.
I mean, just circling back to the topic part for a moment. Two thoughts, and this is something actually I sort of discussed in our conversation with Fred over the weekends, but it's probably useful to play back from other parties. My gut feeling is that actually having an open, if there is going to be an issue with people wanting things to be on topic, and the sort of people who want things on topic really do mean on topic as they see them, then don't start with an open bit, because it requires incredible pressure and control to get everything back online. I would strongly suggest that if you say it's going to be on this, you do two things. One is you don't start with a general thing or get everyone explaining everyone explaining who they are. So it's not because it's not relevant, but it derails. It immediately takes you out of the topic. And the other thing is, I think, to be quite explicit about what the topic is in the minds of the people who ask for it. Because the nature of this sort of conclave is it's about text that fits together in all sorts of ways. And I put my hand up. I'm an incredibly sort of discursive thinker. I follow the train of thought. It's what most of my work is doing. It's generally not working within a fixed bound. So just saying this is the topic I don't think is enough. You almost sort of need to say it's this topic, and we're not, and what we want, the rabbit holes we don't want to go down to. You can't cover everything, but I think it gives people an idea. So when we need that, because otherwise it's going to upset some people who want more focus. I think that is the kind way to do it, because otherwise, whoever it is who's trying to hold the ring will always be ending up shutting somebody down in a way that always leaves them feeling unheard, and other people who are annoyed because we're off topic, and you only just started. So I think I would keep general sessions general, or put them after a topic discussion. So we're going to discuss topic X for an hour or however long, and then afterwards we'll have a general discussion, and we can get round to the people who maybe are new, and that kind of thing. Doing it the other way around, I just sense that all experiences that's a recipe for unintended disaster.
That sounds good.
I'm inclined to agree that it's a lot easier for lurkers to countenance remaining in something when their first introduction is sort of intentional and specific, and there's less danger for them to have to kind of announce themselves and plant any kind of flag in the ground as to what they are or why they're there. Some people don't mind doing that and sort of putting their hand up and saying like, I like space, but that's I think the exception that proves the rule. So yeah, I think sort of running talks like talks, and then really attempting to make sure that people's actual questions are questions that pertain really specifically to the speaker's presentation, is a really valuable thing for just being legible to a broader set of folks.
I think you're right, both of you, on those points. And so, Mark, to your points about having open session in the beginning, I think you're absolutely right. So what we probably want to do is maybe we have 5 minutes, or not even a kind of a time, but if there's new people, we do introductions like normal. But just say that let's say that maybe the last half an hour is general, or 20 minutes, or 15 minutes, whatever. So
I would say with introductions, Fred. Sorry to interrupt. Just a second. The danger there is, once again, you lose the room. So by all means, I think by all means welcome new people, but certainly the people who are regulars, there should be somewhere, and we have sort of put it online, and we can always point to that. If there's a feeling for you or anyone that somebody is sort of not well described, or their description's out of date, then that's a sidebar conversation could happen, because I think anyone who's reasonably involved is not going to be that bent out of shape if asked to just put a few words in, or necessarily someone else write them in and say, look, that's what's going to be there, unless you sort of complain. But otherwise, if you open it up and you go around the table, you've lost the audience. You've essentially lost control already.
I don't think so, because I think it's also very, very important with introductions. I've heard, for instance, Tess, who was a new member who was here a lot. She was introduced by one of my very closest friends, so that's why she kind of jumped into this. So we need to have on our website or something some introductory information. And one of the things her and I talked about a while ago was, when one new person comes in, we make that recording of what that process is available. So with that in mind, I kind of obviously understand what you mean by losing the audience, because I agreed with you on how we shouldn't have an open beginning. But if us who are here all the time, we should be able to do a 5-10 second intro, because then we look really friendly and eager, but not a long rambling, which I don't think we do anyway. But and also check with the person, do they want to say anything more than their name, or are they that's enough. And then just put a clip of some new person like that on the page and say, when you join us, this is what you can expect. The onboarding is a bit of an issue, because even though we're very open, it's very hard for most people to be like, oh, whatever, I'll just go in and see what happens. So we're not going to have the first 15 minutes open. That's clear, Mark. That's a very good point. We are going to keep the difference between themed, open, and presentations. Where open generally are open, like today. themed, we will stick more to it. And Mark, I remember that you and I have had a few times when we're discussing something and it goes on and it annoys other people. One of the things I've noticed is I have said, I get it, I'll deal with it later or something. You find that unsatisfying because you don't feel I have got it. We need a way to properly sidebar that so that neither one of us, so I am not superficial and you're not annoyed, to say so. One thing,
yeah, I think the thing is to sidebar things more explicitly. So not because it takes away any sense of whether there's been transmission or not. It's just saying, okay, we're gonna cut here, and that's much easier, I think, for anyone, because it doesn't matter where you sit in the conversation at the time. So, okay, fine, done. Tie off, move on. Yeah.
So okay, cool. Because I see your hand, Peter. Just a quick second. So driving Andrea to the airport to Heathrow, which took a while. She's not interested in this aspect at all, but you know, I do interfaces all the time. I'm obsessive like you guys. So I thought about something we did a while ago with the transcript. If I now say, Claude, it's really important that you note down that we talked about buying Coca-Cola and milk. That now will be caught by the AI. So if we have a prompt of the analysis that says what was said that was important, chances are very high that sentence I just said will be there, right? So why don't we do something additional? Why don't we have an explicit way to do what we just talked about? So for instance, I would say, Peter, let's put that into a sidebar. Or Peter might say, okay, I will write an article on this called, and then you give it a name. And those things, even though they're spoken, may be almost links. Or maybe, let's say for the fun of it, because, okay, I will write blah, 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 goes in the transcript as that. So it literally becomes a link, even though it was spoken. And then, Brandel, in your world, with the timelines and stuff, if Peter then produces a paper or a web page or whatever that has that identifier on it, even though it's a little fuzzy, and it's in the environment we're going into, we could see that they were created at the similar time or connected. How cool would that be? Spoken hyperlinks.
Yeah. I mean, I think generally being able to, in terms of being able to sidebar and reference, that makes sense. The main thing that I would say is just like, it really depends on what you believe the point of the communication is. And if it's sort of a performance, if it's a mutual performance among people who are sort of trying to evoke a specific thing, then the inside baseball is not necessary, because what the conversation is something that's really for an audience, and imagining it as such is can be useful. And which is sort of a similar thing to the resolution that I would have for Peter with this article is how much of your audience's time and attention do you think you have, and then what best use can you make of it, given that as a fixed resource? Something that I used to tell folks on Apple.com is that, like, I understand that you have 120,000 pixels of story to tell about iPhone 7. However, if we only get to 3 screens worth, what should be on those first 3 screens, so that we believe that we've given them the best story they possibly can have? And so, yeah, it's always about your audience and the kind of resources that you can expect to ask of them. So anything that you sort of put as machinations around that in order to satisfy sort of a more committed customer, I have been in America too long, then the better you can kind of make sure that these things are structured.
This is really, really interesting and cool, because it also goes to what Mark was talking about with citations, because in Doug Engelbart's world, as we all know, if you open a document, you can say open it as an outline. So a link kind of thing can describe how it should be viewed. So I could imagine a reference to Peter's massive article in the book where it is in truncated form, but the addressability contains the ability to refer to the full version, which is a separate document, but which is clearly connected. Right, so you have, because I don't want to throw things away either. Actually, let me show you on the kind of point you were making there. So if we go to our dear website for here, right? So you've all seen the new page, I hope. Mark, please have a look and see if you're quoted correctly. And look at this, isn't that quite nice? Right.
Quoted, sorry, where? Oh, I see in the
Alan and Bob.
Yeah.
Just think it's quite lovely. Right. So if we now look at so the video was awful. It turns out my 360 camera worked just fine, but because we were stressed in the beginning, because I was herding geniuses, so we started 15 minutes late, it wasn't in a very good spot, and the Zoom audio was variable. But what I've done is, as expected, these little summaries, right?
Oh,
So
good,
one
good.
one thing that was, so this is what I need you to have a look at, Mark, and tell me if I should change. A lot of it's been changed by me or others, but here's the bizarre thing. The first sentence has a line break. It makes this so much more readable. It's absolutely crazy. So when you skim through, this heavy bit becomes if you really care. So Vince one was a bit long because I had forgotten to do it. I did it separately, but oh, okay. So the test one. Let's just do the test. I hadn't hit the enter. Boom. Right, from this to this, it's almost night and day, isn't it, guys?
Yeah, Apple marketing taught me taught me to love white space.
Yeah, but I find it so incredibly interesting. It's almost like this should be in a lighter gray or something.
Yeah. I mean, those are the fundamentals of things like information architecture.
Yeah.
Those kind of posts of you will read this first, then this second. Actually coming up with a taxonomy and making sure, one, that it's there, and two, that it's adhered to so that people are sort of correctly trained to follow it is actually transformative. And that's, if you take nothing else from Bob Horn's book, then the structured text with the paragraphs and things like that is an incredible thing to really kind of emphasize.
Oh, absolutely. And the only problem with printed, as we were talking about, is there it actually has a cost. But two things. Number one, maybe we keep it 1 hour today because it's just the four of us. Thank you, because there's some family things that can be taken care of. The other thing is, when it comes to the future meetings, how about we agree, especially Mark and Peter and me, because we have the most long-running things, use the secret sidebar chat both ways. Right, so if you feel ignored, write to me in the chat, okay? Don't go away pissed off, because I most certainly do not want to ignore you at all. I have a lot to balance. The main conversation, maybe a new person, and Ken Perlin being, NYU professor, inventor, and got to make him happy, all these things. Maybe Dean, it's a lot of stuff going on, and you guys are the core people here. Right, so I'm going to send Mark a secret message. Right, it is so useful. I'm going to send one to Peter as well. I mean, obviously you know how to do it. I'm just having fun.
Is the chat set up for allowing direct messaging? The only thing I have learned with Zoom early on is the one thing you have to pay attention to is it tends to remember what you were doing before. So it's very easy to send to all rather than to a person or vice versa. It's normally more embarrassing if you send the private message to everybody, but that's the only thing I've tripped over with this.
Yeah, actually, I think, Frodo, you're the only one who can send to everybody. I think only the host can send to everybody, and I can only send to you or everybody.
Okay, so that means that if I feel things, if I haven't already said hi secretly, so to speak, privately, whatever, then if it gets a bit much, I should remember to text you guys so you can respond to me. But also because we have so many years behind us now, we have real trust and warmth in the community. So even in the public chat, if you write, I really feel I need to finish that point. Or can I say this later? Or, all right, it wasn't brilliant that I had to be, that you cut me off. Actually, maybe say it nicer, whatever. But I will write something about this or whatever. Okay, because otherwise it's just such a waste of time. Yeah, Mark.
I think very quickly, I think the issue of sort of initially cutting off, I think we've covered by the fact of just saying, okay, no, we need to sidebar it. I actually genuinely think most people can take with that, because it's equally abrupt always around. So okay, fine, and you can sort of take whatever point you have to us, in a sense, to a sidebar an hour later. So I think that's probably covered by that. The point about understanding, I think, is it's only, I know in my case, because most of my work has been teaching people who are constantly saying I understand when they patently don't. So you have to learn to understand that they're I understand why it happens. The difficulty is when you're actually trying to help someone, making them understand, sometimes you have to be persistent, because the first 2 or 3 tries don't get through. Yeah. So this is why I'm quite happy if someone says, well, okay, we'll just time that out, that's fine. So it doesn't really bother me. And I don't think that is actually problematic.
Well, you're highlighting a really important perspective here, Mark, and it's really struck me the last week or two of, it's possible to know something, but not know the aspect of the something that is relevant to now. Right, I've seen that in myself, I've seen it in others. In that St. Petersburg European University thing I presented, my friend who presented before me, I can't remember what it is now, but it struck me. He presented something that I know completely well, but then I was like, oh, it's that too. So maybe in a situation like that, try to type it in the chat or something. But the thing is, we're trying to formalize the community a bit while keeping it friendly and easygoing, and to grow it a little bit. And we have even more Ken Perlin feedback here. And if he brings in his specific kinds of people, we got to make sure that they get whatever they expect for that day. They won't come here every day. And further, also this year at the symposium, there was quite a lot more women than we've had before, which is good. And it just indicates the diversity. We want diversity of thoughts, backgrounds, all of that stuff. One thing that is odd, though, because we're following Sloan, and on the webpage, we say how many identify as women. Why do we not say how many identify as men? The language is weird, right? People change sex in both directions, even though it's at least double going from man to woman, but still seemed a bit odd.
Last time I looked was what I was born with, but I'm old-fashioned.
Well, it's not a fashion thing, but it is really, really important to me anyway that people feel very comfortable in the community. Sorry, something written here by Mark. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I mean, the interest. That's one thing I observe, is so that you can almost tell who's working on one screen as opposed to multiple, because those who are working on multiple are busy sort of doing two. And the other thing with chat is there tend to be 2, if not 3 strands to the chat. I don't find it problematic. There's one is sort of people are chucking in literal references and things, because that's useful. There are others who essentially are trying to almost start a side chat, or if only to introduce a point. They're not trying to divert the conversation, just make a point. And there are other people who just like to generally spitball, and which can produce some very good observation and comment. And I haven't found the blend of all those 3 to be problematic. I think the biggest problem is simply that, if I was just using a phone or something, the fact there might be a freewheeling discussion going on in the chat might be lost to me, because I've got to make a decision which thing is on screen. So that's just something to be mindful of, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Also, Peter, really briefly, the way you now said, whatever you were born with, we have to be careful with referring to things as being old-fashioned. One of the things that came up at the symposium, there were 2 presentations by women who feel there's sexism a real issue for them in this. And Mark and some of us staying here, we had at least an hour-long discussion on it. And it comes down to, it's not about being woke in pronouns. I think pronouns are ridiculous unless someone actually wants to have them different, which is absolutely fine. but we shouldn't all have to do it. There's a bit of a balance, but because we want neurodivergent and all kinds of divergent people, if we say old-fashioned, then that's a very weighted statement. You know what I mean? So it's just, let's be very careful. Also, Peter, so Ken Pfeiffer, I didn't print his name badge, right? I just forgot because I'm not an organized person like Deanie. It's one of our key differences. I felt so bad. I made him one in gold.
Oh,
Very
nice.
nice.
Not actual gold, but it's a nicer metal than Mark and I have, right?
Yeah.
It's
I
just,
love
I think all of us in the room right now know what it's like to be excluded. It's not cool. So that's why we had that discussion about different kinds of people and must feel, unless they come in and they are a DICK, you know, let's be.
Yeah.
Well, I'd suggest one
I-
thing there is oh, sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
Just on something that I've unfortunately too rarely see in discussions of diversity and inclusion is that having a more diverse group is more uncomfortable and less easy, and what that does is make people try harder and think harder, and that's why it's good. And so when people think that diversity should feel better, and it doesn't, then they feel aggrieved, and that's actually not true. And I find it helpful to remind people that it is harder and makes you try to be more careful, and that's why it's better. Yeah.
Good point. Mark, and then Peter, who's the only one holding his hand up.
Well, let Peter go first. Put his hand up.
Yeah,
Okay,
Peter, go.
I think one of the factors in my paper coming off as being heavier weight than would be optimal is that I wasn't able to reproduce the stretch text that was built into the user interface of the anti-gravity platform. When you're actually interacting with it, some of what was in full form in the transcript was actually hidden under a disclosure triangle. And you have a little disclosure triangle that would come down. So they had like a couple elements of stretch text in there to make it feel more lightweight for someone using it. But I wanted to capture everything in the transcript. And because we don't have stretch text in our document, it all came out in its entirety. When you're using the system, you might choose to never expand those tabs to make the AI's output look more compact than it is in Toto. So that's a factor there. Also, on the idea of saying things for the AI to pick up on, that comes back to something I coined a term a while back, a few years ago, epi markup. And the idea there was that you'd include in normal natural language text statements that could be picked up by an island grammar by a processing system. So if I say, let's see, digressing to whatever the topic is, that's ordinary natural language. But I could also write a parser that would look at the AI generated transcript, find digressing to discuss what, and pull that out as being a topic and treat that as if there'd been some sort of a formal structure built in to the transcript. So the directives to the processing system are actually implicit in the natural language level, but it's done knowing that there's going to be an island grammar applied to it to extract those elements from the surrounding context to perform essentially a transpilation into a set of command directives that could be extracted from the original text document. So I always like using the term epi markup when I'm talking about that sort of system. I think it's helpful to name that phenomena.
I just added a line to our prompt to try to deal with some of these things. And I thank you guys for today. And I think this symposium was a bit different. It was a bit more on point. More people about text. Before it has been a couple, because we're growing, that are a bit. Next year, also, in closing, really briefly, we're not, I think, going to make the same style of book as we've done up till now. There's a notion of having a book called Powerful Text, which will be page after page on how you can use text to be clever, have more power over your thinking, the kickoff to this was a discussion of using the command line and how easy it is to teach me. And I said, well, don't teach me, let's teach millions, right? So a kind of a version of the book, hardcover, open it up, nothing but a cursor, next page, there's maybe a tab command or something that starts the terminal. And on the right-hand page, there's a description of what that is. So each page, there may be an interview with someone, there may be ideas, so it'll be much more a help for people. It may be how to use BibTeX. It may be a serious graphics routine. It may be what JSON is. I don't know. It could be programming. It could be prose. So it's much more, let's put something into the world that people can use while we keep separate our philosophical discussions and thinking. So I think it'll be, yes.
Sorry, I put a note just to say that listening to that, I there was an assumption in there that people will read 2 up. This is not whether they want to or not, but it's probably an assumption that if you're reading, say, on a phone, would you be able to read? So I like the design idea. I say just a practical challenge in delivery.
It's primarily a printed book, printed and XR. If we do it for phone, we will have to deal with exactly that design on how do you flip. But that's a huge discussion, and thank you for today. I look forward to Monday week, and let's keep practicing all kinds of good things. Thank you guys for being the 3 musketeers showing up today.
Have a great week.
You too. Bye-bye.